Action Comics number 1000 is a collection of some of the greatest creators in history telling the story of DC's oldest hero. Let's dive in and see what they got. What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is an I Review, a show where I go over a comic book, its story, its art, give you my impressions, and let you know whether it's something you should go back to the comic book shop for or not. Make sure you subscribe to get more of these every single week. The book that I want to talk about right now is Action Comics number 1000, which is collecting everybody that you could possibly want, well, you know, living people that you could want, on a Superman book and telling the story of Superman. It's a real concentration on the origin story, and it's broken up into so many different stories, I don't know if I can handle them all. But let's dive in and see what we think about all of them. Action Comics 1000 is a milestone for the entirety of the comic book industry. You take this newspaper rejected idea of Superman, this Man of Steel, and you move it forward 80 years, becoming one of the most iconic images inside the history of the world. One of the most recognizable figures, bar none. And the history of Superman is actually spelled out on all these variant covers that take you through the various decades from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and to the present. And this is just a history lesson on Superman. So you've got a variety of different stories from a number of different creators. We open up with Dan Jurgens telling a relatively classic Superman story. He's saving the world, but he's also got another place to be. And the big thing is that he doesn't need to be at this special place. He doesn't want to be honored as Superman. But the stories that they tell, what happens during that, is that we get to hear this kind of appreciation. The mayor was in a subway car that was saved. The fire chief was there, and he was saved as he was trying to save the life of a child. A villain who was on the wrong side of the tracks, he was one that was kind of saved by Superman when it came to those things. And what we find is that this, even though Superman has been picking up on various kind of hints around the world, he has been misguided. He has been misled by his friends who have taken over the role of protector of the earth. And that is all an appreciation for what Superman is capable of doing. And even though he's Superman and he doesn't do this for the recognition, he knows that every now and then some people need to show that appreciation for what he does, and it's his job as Superman to make sure that he does that make sure that he allows them to give that kind of closure. And if that gives you an idea of what kind of stories are told inside Action Comics number 1000, it's going to be a real homage to what Superman is in his history. And nothing is more particular than that than probably one of the best, if not the best, story inside Action Comics 1000, and that's from Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason. And what they do is explore the history of Superman through the vantage point of a combat with Vandal Savage, basically exposed to chronal tachyons that has transported him back through the history of his publication. No longer able to fly, barely faster than a speeding bullet, the Man of Steel stopping a train to save a child, throwing a tank through the war. And this is Patrick Gleason relaying all these classic visual images, all in an homage to the history as Superman navigates and negotiates the tale of what he's talking about, what Vandal Savage is putting him through, and that every image that he goes to, every varying piece of history, it burns that fire to be dedicated, and it burns him. It lights and ignites his desire to be that champion of good. Even though you're talking about moments from Frank Miller where he's getting smashed with a lightning bolt, or even so far as Kingdom Come. And this is just, I love everything about this story. The visuals, just page after page, full page art regarding Superman, his history, all interpreted by Patrick Gleason, who's done a phenomenal job on the main Superman title. It easily makes it one of the best stories, finishing with their own run and dealing with Superman's birthday, April 18th. I love everything about that story. There's also other stories that you've got lost artwork that has been transposed into a Superman story. You've got various one-on-ones between Lex Luthor and Superman. So one of them is being told by Paul Levitz and Neil Adams, the other one being told by Scott Snyder and Raphael Albuquerque. These are fights, battles of wits between these two, or a show of human appreciation for what each other's contributed to their lives. Lex Luthor looking back on his life in Smallville, where Superman saved him at a very young age, and showing his appreciation because he acquired some very serious items to try and kill Superman, and yet he won't. You've got Geoff Johns getting in on the fun, combining with Richard Donner and Olivier Coipel, and telling a story about that first interaction of Superman, that first piece of Action Comics with the car that has been smashed to the front end. Superman stopping this drunken driver, somebody that feels like they don't necessarily have any kind of consequences, that they are above everybody, that they bully people into these things. Butch, the man that he hung from the telephone pole during that story, it's a very clear interaction, and it shows a lesson that Superman Superman is trying to teach. He's had his fair share of hard knocks, and Butch can make a decision today, be the person who wasn't there for someone and be there for someone else. You can fix your life or you can junk it. That is your choice. So while Butch looks out into this desolation, he sees that his car is fixed at the end, and he opens up the fire hydrant for the kids so that way they can experience a life that he wasn't available to. That's what Superman does. Superman grabs the humanity inside of all of us, and he brings it out. He brings it to the surface. He reminds us that in times of need, in the worst struggles that we have experienced in ourselves, we can overpower and overcome. He embodies the best, the human potential, and he's not even human. He's an alien that was taught our ways and that has taken them onto his own. And it's truth, it's justice, it's the American way. It's classic historical storytelling of Superman, and that's the most interesting thing about it, because when we talk about Superman, the best Superman stories always deal with Superman's dual nature regarding humanity and his alien nature. He's embraced everything about this and has chosen to become a beacon, become this goodwill symbol for all those that need hope. And when we see Tom King and Clay Mann get in on the act, their story tells the end of that Earth, that end of that relationship that he's really cultivated. Billions of years living, essentially becoming immortal due to his exposure to the sun. He talks to the grave of his parents before the Earth is consumed by an exploding star, by the death, the heat death of the Earth itself. And we hear about Lois, we hear about the future, we hear about everything, and it just shows the appreciation that he has for Ma and Pa. Thanks for everything they have ever done. And on their gravestone, of course, you've got beloved parents and grandparents. You gave us hope. And that hope was carried on through Superman. In 5 minutes, we've got Louise Simonson, we've got Jerry Ordway. They're telling a Jimmy Olsen story. They're talking about everything that he can do inside these minutes of time. He's got 2 minutes to deadline. He's balancing the abilities to be a reporter as well as be Superman, and he is doing the best job that he possibly can with it. We've got another one that's written by Paul Dini with Jose Luis Garcia, which has got a little bit of cheesecake in it, which is very much a Paul Dini story, but it's telling the history of Superman. It's telling everything about the big boy in blue, and it gets to the end where his greatest foe, his nemesis, Mr. Mxyzptlk, has brought Superman to his knees, and then that's where everything kind of fades out, because evidently when they're role-playing, which is a really weird entendre for Paul Dini to work in here, it's all about what Superman is and what Superman defines as part of them. Mxyzptlk, of course, wants to be the greatest nemesis of Superman, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that. They both define each other, and it's just another embodiment of these things. We've got Faster Than a Speeding Bullet, which is going to deal with a Brad Metzler story with John Cassidy, and it's everything that happens in an instant. It's just this really great blockbuster storytelling style. It's not necessarily my favorite, but it's still something that's got tons of power to it. And then we get to the end, the final conclusion, the piece de resistance, or at least what everybody's been waiting for, and that is Brian Michael Bendis' story of Superman and Jim Lee, and this is a direct setup for what's going to be happening inside Action Comics. Really, it's a setup for what's going to be happening inside Man of Steel, the miniseries that Brian Michael Bendis is launching next month. I want to gush about every single story inside this book. However, I will say that this is a traditionally Brian Michael Bendis story. The change in costume is something that isn't necessarily explained, it's just talked about. It's a very meta commentary on his situation when it comes to his suit. And then, of course, in very Brian Michael Bendis fashion, he's disassembling the character itself. He's breaking them down so that way, hopefully, he can build him back up. He does give way to Jim Lee and allows him to put together this much more action-packed kind of environment, but the key is that there is a villain here, and we have no idea, no recollection, no real understanding of who that is until we actually get his name. He is Rogol Zar. He is the reason that Krypton has been destroyed. He promised Jor-El that one day he would cleanse the universe of this Kryptonian sickness, and it ends today as he drives his sword through Superman's chest. And that is going to lead up to the Man of Steel. So if you're talking about the homages to Action Comics history, to Superman's history, to who he is as a character, they are pillars, they are foundational pieces of who Superman is, and the expression of love for Superman is everything that you would want out of Action Comics number 1000. And then you get very different takes on these kind of things. The story at the end, the one from Brian Michael Bendis, is the only one that sets up some sort of future storyline. Everything else is paying homage to the past. Everything that Brian Michael Bendis does is all about the future and setting up the story that he is going to be telling. And whether you love it or you hate it, because you have the right to do both, it is going to give you the deepest insight into how Brian Michael Bendis is going to be telling Superman stories in Action Comics and Superman #1. And Man of Steel is going to be a bigger conclusion to that. It's going to let him breathe a lot of life into his version of this character. Am I on board with it? For now, yes, but I want to know what you guys think too, so hit me up in the comments down below and we can start that conversation. I assume that it's going to be a pretty heated one, so let's just keep it clean for everybody, but make sure that you hit the comments section, make sure that you put in your opinion so that way we can have that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.